Aloha everyone and welcome to Skincare with Hyram. If you don't know who I am, my name's Hyram and I'm passionate about teaching you how to perfect your skincare routine. And today is not actually a skincare video. I am going to be adding on to my mental health series. If you haven't seen any of my videos from my mental health, sorry, I ran out of breath. Whew, I need to learn how to take a breath. If you haven't watched any of the videos from my mental health series, I highly recommend it. My life has been It's been a journey, and I've talked about multiple things, whether it be coming to terms with my sexuality and growing up in a very religious household, to developing and enduring my eating disorder, as well as my most recent video where I talked about how I tried to take my own life. Now, those are all very, very heavy topics, and I just want to start out this video by saying this is overall going to be a much more positive video, talking about the brighter side, coming out of those issues, learning how to properly deal with them, and lead the life that I'm living now. In this video, I want to talk about how I recovered from my eating disorder and depression. And let me say, when I say recovered, I don't mean I'm at a point where I don't even think about those problems anymore. Far from it. Elements of both my eating disorder and depression are still prevalent and visible in my life today. But I've learned how to live with and manage both of these things, and I want to share my story with you. Not gonna lie, for a long time I hated the concept of recovering, because in the middle of my eating disorder, every time I would try to look online for people who are struggling with eating disorders, there was only a presence of people saying, I've recovered from my eating disorder, I'm healed, I've changed, I don't have to worry about that anymore. And here I was in the middle of my eating disorder or in the middle of recovery wondering, is there anyone out there that feels like they're never going to get past this? And that's when I realized we needed more visible stories about the hard parts of enduring these things, which is why I made my previous videos. And honestly, if you do want to see more of the details about my previous struggles, I highly recommend watching those ones before this video. It'll give it a lot more context and understanding. I'll have them linked in the description box below. But yeah, I just want to clarify, this is not a I'm healed video. This is a video showing the brutal and honest reality of recovering and how I've been able to get to the point where I am today. Before I make this video, I do want to make a quick trigger warning. There will be some discussion of self-harm, eating disorders, and depression. I won't be going deep into these topics, but there will still be some discussion and reference to them. So if you are triggered by these topics, please be careful. And if needed, go watch another video and save this one for a different time. As with all my mental health videos, I feel it's important to share my story online because there needs to be more representation of mental illness and similar struggles online. We as a society have come so far within just the past 3 years, and it's absolutely amazing. I love it, but there still needs to be more stories out there. And truthfully, more than anything, I want to make these videos to help any of you who are watching who may be struggling with something similar, to reassure you that you're not alone. Because when I was going through each of these things, particularly my eating disorder and self-harm, I felt like I was truly alone, and I just wish there was someone in my life that I could look to that had made it past the struggles I'm dealing with. Of course, I am not a counselor, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a mental health professional. My story is not to be taken as advice or guidance for your journey specifically. By no means am I saying you should implement the specific things that I did, but there are some overall recommendations that I want to make in this video that I think can help anyone get put on the right track to be able to get access to resources that will help you get out of what you're currently going through. As we get into this video, I also want to say I am so excited because this video is actually sponsored, and I have never done a sponsorship in my mental health series before because why? But this video is actually sponsored by BetterHelp, and it could not have been better timing because, not even joking, I've had this video planned for about 4 months, and in my notes in the video I had a whole section planned out to talk about BetterHelp and how I've used it in the past. And then BetterHelp reached out and I was like, oh my gosh, of course, this is perfect timing. BetterHelp is an amazing website that I have used for years that will help you better assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You can start communicating within 48 hours of signing up, and they have a broad range of expertise with a network of over 15,000 counselors, which may or may not be available locally depending on your area. Their services are accessible worldwide, and one of the coolest things is that you can log in at any time and message your counselor. And I used this tool a lot in the past when I was really going through it, or I wanted to make sure we talked about something in our session. I was able to message my counselor and get a thoughtful response. And you can schedule weekly video or phone calls, so instead of having to go to an actual office, you can do everything at home. Is there something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? When I started with BetterHelp, I was in a really dark place. I had just gotten out of a really toxic relationship. I was overworking myself. I was so stressed every day and didn't even have the time to think about if I was okay. BetterHelp is really committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches and makes it super easy to switch your counselor in case the connection just isn't right. I did this once before when I just didn't feel like my counselor was the right match, and immediately for free was paired with a different great counselor. BetterHelp is more affordable than traditional therapy, which I can personally speak to because therapy sessions in Hawaii cost about $200 to $300 per session. So it's very very expensive, BetterHelp is way more affordable and has financial aid options available. BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today. Go to betterhelp.com/Hyram, that's better, H-E-L-P, and join over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. And for you guys, if you go to betterhelp.com/Hyram, you'll get 10% off your first month. So check out that link in the description box below. Thank you so much, BetterHelp, for sponsoring this. All right, let's just get into this. Ooh, I'm a little nervous. I mean, I always am before my mental health videos, but honestly, this one is going to be a breeze compared to my last ones because those were really dark. So let's take it back. Before I even ever started the recovery journey or even thought about it, I want to talk about the period where I was in the middle of my eating disorder. Now, every single part of my mental health journey has been difficult, but nothing will compare. Nothing will even come close to the difficulty it took to maintain my eating disorder. That's why I've always said people who have eating disorders are the strongest people I know because, oh my God, I don't know if I could ever do that again. It was so hard. But even in the middle of that, because of the addictive cycles of being in an eating disorder, because of the depression, the lack of hope, I honestly felt like there was no escape. I was miserable and I didn't feel like there was a way out. However, at the same time, I didn't think that anything was wrong. I honestly thought of my eating disorder as a lifestyle choice of just a way of living. I didn't think there was anything inherently wrong with it. And I would get annoyed when people in my life would tell me I needed help because I didn't see anything wrong with what I was doing. It's a really hard dynamic to explain, but I'd say it's most similar to when you're in a toxic relationship and you're in love with the person and you're putting up with all of their toxic bullshit and everyone in your life is trying to tell you how bad of a situation it is and you don't realize it until you're out of it. And then you have the full mental clarity to see how actually toxic it was. I'd say that's the most similar comparison I can make, but obviously at a very extreme level because you're literally killing yourself every single day. And I stuck with my eating disorder and self-harm for a long time thinking that this was just normal, stuff like this happens. I was okay with it and refused to see a problem. It wasn't until I started planning out my suicide that I realized, okay, I am planning to do something that is irreversible. When it comes to an eating disorder or self-harm, those things don't affect your actual ability to live within one swift moment. And when I started seriously planning to take my own life, I realized maybe something is wrong. Maybe I do need some help. I mean, it took me long enough, but that was the moment. And I remember the next day hobbling around campus because I had so little energy because I was refusing to eat. I happened to be walking by the counselor's office and it was like my muscles took control of me and all of a sudden I found myself in the counselor's office signing up for a counseling session. And I remember being so shocked at myself because prior to this, my only experiences with therapy had been very bad. If you watch my video talking about growing up gay and coming to terms with my own sexuality, I've talked about how my therapy experience was just awful. And it surprised me how quickly I had gone from the absolute depths of misery and not thinking anything was wrong to immediately taking action to help improve myself and get over this. And I really think it's a testament to the number one thing that has to be established when someone is recovering. You first have to realize and admit that there is a problem, that something is wrong, that you need help. And it may seem like an obvious thing, but when you're in the middle of all of that, your judgment is so clouded, you don't really have the ability to think as clearly. I mean, we already know from data that people who have eating disorders have their brains physically shrink in mass up to 25%. And being that you're on literal survival mode, your brain really doesn't have a lot of room to comprehend how to get out of that reality. And for me, one of the beautiful things about realizing that I had a problem is that I am someone who's pretty solution oriented. I don't like to be in a situation that I don't want to be in. And the second that I am put in a comfortable situation, I'm the type of person that's like, let's get to work, let's fix this, let's get this resolved as soon as possible. Like, I am not a good friend to vent to about something because I will always be like, okay, what can we do to fix this? Let's have a plan in place. What strategy do you have? Let's go. Let's get this done as soon as possible. Let's get you out of this situation. Not always what a lot of people want to do, but that really is me. Once I put my mind to something, you cannot change it and nothing in the world will stop it. And I don't think that's something that's just present in me. Like I said before, people who struggle with eating disorders are some of the strongest minded people I have ever met in my life. And I've always said, if they have the mental strength to be able to endure an eating disorder, they 100% absolutely have the mental strength to be able to overcome it. But of course, it all came down to a self-realization that I had a problem. And until I realized that, I was never going to take the initiative I needed to get better. Now, the second stage of my recovery was actually therapy. And I'd say this has been the longest stage. Once I walked into the counseling office and made an appointment, I knew I had to fulfill that appointment. And I remember showing up and it was very comfortable and safe and open-minded environment. And immediately I felt like it was a place where I could just talk to someone about everything, no filter, and not have to worry about if they were going to judge me, if I was going to be embarrassed or humiliated. And let me tell you what I thought therapy was going to be like. I thought I was going to start going to therapy and every single session would get easier. I would feel better. Every day I would walk out of a session feeling a little bit lighter, feeling less like I wanted to take my own life, eating more, and that session by session it would slowly get better. That is not what happened. I have always said this as a cautionary warning to people who are starting therapy. For me, it got much worse before it got better. The first 4 to 6 months of therapy for me were awful. They were horrible, and interestingly enough, they actually pushed me closer to suicide and pushed me to restrict my diet even more. And I know that sounds awful, and it sounds like totally contrary to what should be happening, and that's why I was so horrified when I started therapy and was proud of myself for showing up every single week, but only feeling worse and worse with every week. But I share this because after talking to people who have gone to intensive therapy or therapy to try to reverse serious conditions like eating disorders, this is typically the route that takes place. Let me phrase it this way. Typically things like anxiety disorders, eating disorders, depression, self-harm stem from a coping mechanism to deal with trauma from the past. Now, if you're like me, I like pretending my trauma does not even exist, moving forward with life not ever even thinking about it, managing to convince myself that those things never affected me. Meanwhile, there are years on end of my childhood that I don't even remember, and I was struggling with an eating disorder, depression, and self-harm, all because of the trauma that I wasn't able to deal with. And in order to resolve trauma, you have to go back to that trauma and explore it and understand what happened, how it's affecting you now, how you can properly grieve what happened, and how you can move forward from now on without letting that trauma affect you. So, like I said, going to therapy involves unpacking all of that trauma from the past. And trust, I had a lot of trauma. A lot. And there were moments where my therapist was like, I'm not qualified to talk about that type of trauma. I'm going to need to pair you with someone else who's had specialized training. But of course, the reality in that moment, having to go back into your mind and explore those things that you've tried to push back so far, that you've tried to forget, and to relive and re-experience those things is scary and traumatizing and makes life horrible in the moment. And that's why for those first 4 months, I felt horrible because I had to relive all of this trauma that I had tried so hard to forget. But the truth is, you're never going to be able to move past that unresolved trauma unless you understand how it's affecting you today. Because if you can understand that and your response to it, you can make the connections that you need to be able to unlock a happy life. Therapy was first not what I expected it to be like. My previous experience with therapy was a therapist telling you what you should do, telling you how to think. And for some people that works amazingly. But for me and my stubborn ass, I don't like being told what to do. And what I found works in my therapy is having the therapist direct your thoughts. Not necessarily telling you what to think or what to feel, but more so asking you questions that engage your intellect and deeper psyche to be able to understand why you do what you do and what you can do better. My healing came through trauma recognition and understanding. The thing I always say and recommend to everyone, and I'm so glad I did, is stick with it. It gets so hard before it gets better, but once it gets better, it is the most freeing and exhilarating and amazing thing. And I think that's what shocked me so much about my experience, is that the first 4 to 6 months of therapy were awful, but immediately afterwards, I was able to start my recovery process so quickly. Within 8 months after starting therapy, I was eating normally, I was exercising, I wasn't as suicidal, and there wasn't necessarily anything that I could pinpoint, like this one sentence my therapist said or this one realization I had. It was more so unpacking and understanding that trauma and adjusting the ways I responded to it that freed myself, and I was able to start living a happy life. Now, I did have to drop out of college because I was paying for all my own expenses and tuition and couldn't afford it anymore, and because of that, I was no longer able to go to therapy. But that's around the time I actually started using BetterHelp, which I thought was so amazing because there was just no way I was going to be able to afford conventional therapy, and BetterHelp was so much more affordable. It was easy to use, and I used BetterHelp for quite a long time. Obviously, understanding your trauma is important, but equally as important is to begin practicing mental patterns and setting parameters to make sure you don't go in those dark spaces mentally again. And there was nothing more liberating to me than linking my behaviors to past traumas. I didn't know why I had to self-harm, and I didn't know why I wanted to take my own life. But as I was able to understand my childhood, how I grew up, the trauma I experienced, and make the connection and see that I am only behaving this way because it is my response to this specific type of trauma I went through, it was so freeing because I finally knew how to fix these issues. I didn't feel directionless anymore. I was able to link why I behaved to what I experienced, and honestly, making those connections made all the difference. And it separated my perception of my eating disorder and depression from myself. I no longer saw myself as a disgusting person with an eating disorder and depression. I saw myself as someone who had been wounded and was only responding in ways that they knew to unresolved pain. It was just so amazing, and that's why I think therapy is so important, because it helps you make those connections and empower you to be able to fix those problems yourself. Now, of course, this sounds very ideal, and while yes, these processes that I was learning were very liberating, of course, the journey has been long and hard and by no means simple and easy. If you guys watch my video about how I tried to take my own life, that happened years after I was able to recover from my eating disorder. And the process of recovery has had many steps back. By no means have I been that person who's like, you know what? I never tried to control my weight again. I never felt suicidal. Far from it. I mean, those are still things that I struggle with in small ways. I mean, hell, even this last month, I have been gaining a little bit of weight, and it has been so hard to not let myself go back in that mental space of restricting my food intake. There have been so many moments where I've hated myself and I've wanted to self-harm, and sometimes even integrated self-harm into my life in ways that I didn't even realize. One of the ways being overworking myself, saying to myself that I don't deserve a break and I don't deserve sleep because I'm a piece of shit and don't deserve that. Like, these are all struggles that I continue to have, and by no means have I perfectly recovered, but it is so much better than it used to be. But a big aspect of this has also been setting mental parameters. It is so important that I set up mental parameters to make sure that I don't entertain certain types of thoughts, don't go down certain mental paths, and to set limits for myself. One of the best ways I can illustrate this is with my eating disorder. Eating disorders are very similar, if not exactly the same, as an addiction. And say if you're a recovering alcohol addict, you don't wait until you're at the bar surrounded by all your friends drinking alcohol to say no. When you're first recovering, you prevent yourself from being in that situation at all. And I have my limits for things I can't do. For example, I don't let myself count calories. I don't let myself use diet apps. I don't track meals. I try to stay away from weigh scales. Or with my depression, if I feel like I'm going to have a self-harm episode, I try to get outside. I go on a drive. I go on a hike. I go to the beach. I spend time with a friend. Or to prevent myself from feeling suicidal, I don't think too much about my purpose or my past. These mental triggers I found that will only lead me to feeling like I'm insignificant and that I don't deserve to be living. And the reality is that these things will be a lifelong struggle. I don't know if I will ever have a day where I am fully recovered from my eating disorder, from my depression, but I've gotten so much stronger, and because of that, it's gotten so much easier to manage. And I am at such a happier place than I was even just a few years ago. To this day, I am still working through childhood traumas, and that's okay. It will honestly probably take a lifetime. There's a lot to unpack there, and I truly feel like that will go on for the rest of my life. It's a slow process, but the most important thing is that I'm trying, I'm working, I'm making steps to becoming better, and because of that, my life is in such a better place than it was before. I've been able to accomplish so many of my goals that I never thought were even possible before. I get to have an incredible job and connect with you guys, and it's incredible because I'm able to enjoy every second of it, because realistically, had I not gone through the steps of trying to improve myself, it wouldn't matter if I was still a miserable college student or in this position now. I wouldn't be happy. I would have still been miserable, and I'm so proud of myself for getting to this point where I feel so much better about myself. I'm so much happier with life, and I will continue to work and continue to improve and continue to learn about and improve myself so that my life can become even better and I can leave a positive impact on the world. And I know this isn't totally relevant, but you guys have played such a huge role in making my life so amazing, in me being so much happier. I say it all the time, like, YouTube literally saved my life, and I just, of course, want to express gratitude for that. Now, obviously, like I said before, these are the things that worked for me. I'm by no means saying that they will work for you. However, each of the steps I said, like recognizing you have a problem, going to therapy, self-awareness and trauma linking, and setting mental parameters, I think are all healthy things that we should each be implementing into our lives. I still believe that, and I feel like practicing each of those things, while they may be different for you than they were for me, really helped me overcome the worst part of my eating disorder and depression, and I think can really help a lot of other people as well. Oh, wow, I've been filming for an hour and a half. Man, this was a lot of information, but I hope it was helpful to you guys. It's always a little bit difficult sharing my story online because vulnerability has never, ever been my strength, but that's exactly why I want to make these videos, because I need to be more vulnerable. I have a platform and so many people struggle with mental health, so I need to be sharing this. And honestly, if it can just help one person recover, one person realize that they're not alone, or just put a smile on one person's face, it's all worth it. It's all worth it. Like I said before, mental health resources will be linked in the description box below. So I hope this video can help spread some awareness. And if you are someone who is going through an eating disorder, depression, self-harm, or just a really difficult time in general, you're not alone. You will get past this. You're strong. I believe in you. If I can get through it and I was a hopeless case, you definitely can, and I believe in you. And if you guys haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell so that you can see my videos every single week. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Mwah.